Mom, help me. My daughter, who should have been happily married, reached out to me one day, her voice shaking as she pleaded. When I asked what was wrong, she explained that her husband and his mother had jetted off on an overseas trip, leaving my daughter severely injured from an accident, alone and unattended. Enraged, I hurried to the hospital, where I was met with the sight of my daughter transformed beyond recognition. A week later, her husband called, cheerfully talking about the souvenirs they had purchased, to which I coldly replied, "We're in the middle of our daughter's funeral." "What?" He'll only be laughing for a little while longer. Now, it's time for revenge. I'm a 55-year-old full-time office worker at a company near my home. I became a widow at the age of 30 when my husband died from an illness. To be honest, I didn't have the luxury of grieving, as I was preoccupied with raising our 3-year-old daughter, Andrea, every single day. We weren't well off, but by the time she reached high school, she began working part-time and matured into a thoughtful, responsible young woman, often saying, "I can take care of my own expenses, Mom. Thanks for everything." After high school, as she didn't have any specific academic aspirations, she began working at a local firm where she met Stanley, her current husband. I remember it like it was just yesterday when she shyly said, "There's someone I want you to meet." I wondered what kind of person she was going to introduce, but Stanley turned out to be a genuine, good-hearted young man. Coincidentally, Stanley's mother, Tracy, was an old school friend of mine. Although reserved, I had heard from Andrea that she was kind, which gave me a sense of relief. Though I hadn't seen Tracy since we graduated, we found common ground as single mothers and enjoyed a pleasant dinner together. I had remained single since my husband's passing, but Tracy seemed happy with her partner. A few months later, Andrea was married, radiating pure happiness. During the initial days of her married life, I would sometimes instinctively cook for her. As time passed, I found myself sighing often due to a certain concern. When asked by a colleague, I shared, "I try reaching out to Andrea, but her responses are late or brief. I guess this is part of her adjusting to married life. It feels lonely though." At the beginning of her marriage, Andrea would regularly send me photos of her meals and ask about my health. However, her communication gradually decreased, which left me feeling a bit isolated. I hadn't seen her for nearly a year since she missed Thanksgiving and Christmas. Adding to my frustration, Tracy would contact me often, updating me about Andrea's seemingly happy life. She suggested, "Stanley, Andrea, and I went out to eat the other day. Next time, let's all go out together, including you, Sabrina." But the invitation never came. I felt a pang of loneliness and bitterness, but as a mature adult, I knew that my daughter's happiness was all that mattered. Some colleagues suggested I find a new man and remarry, but I don't think I could ever find someone I love as much as my late husband. Amid my plans to work diligently and save for retirement, my smartphone rang on a peaceful day off. Seeing my daughter's name on the screen, my heart leapt with joy. In stark contrast to my buoyant voice when I picked up, my daughter's trembling voice said, "Mom, help me." Something serious must have happened, and I was on the verge of tears. After hearing a brief explanation from my daughter, I immediately rushed to a certain location. As I rode in the taxi, I struggled to contain my anger. My daughter lay alone in her hospital bed, looking miserable. "What on earth happened to you, sweetie? Why are you in such a state?" She had been the victim of a hit and run. Her arm and leg were both broken, and she had also hit her head. Her leg was particularly concerning, and it was uncertain if she would ever walk again. After a long absence, my daughter was unrecognizable. Her hair and skin were dull, and she was alarmingly thin. The sight of her broke my heart. Was what you told me over the phone true? At my words, my daughter quietly nodded her head. Unbelievable! He left his wife in this state and went on a trip abroad with his mother? Unlike her hot-headed mother, my daughter started to speak calmly. On the day of the accident, she and her husband were supposed to be leaving for a honeymoon in Hawaii. Backed by the support of their colleagues, they were going to go on a slightly delayed honeymoon. But when she had the accident that day, she thought the trip would obviously be called off. However, Stanley had said something shocking. It's unfortunate, but the cancellation fees for the flight and hotel would be a waste. So I'll just go and enjoy myself. She was shocked at his words. Are you seriously going to our honeymoon alone? At her words, he said, I didn't mention this, but my mother is joining the trip. We've booked the same flight and hotel and plan to surprise you there. My daughter was appalled. You're taking your mother on our honeymoon? She then asked me, I mean, how crazy is that? I'm glad I didn't go on such a trip. At my daughter's indignant words, her husband snorted in laughter. Well, I'll at least buy you a souvenir. Don't tell anyone at work about the accident. They'll think I'm a terrible person. Let's say the accident happened the day we returned from Hawaii. You should let your mother know. Oh, I guess there's no need to worry about that. He left the room laughing loudly, and she lost all contact with him afterwards. When I asked, why couldn't you rely on me? She said, they made me believe you were always troubled by me. I'm sorry for reaching out to you today. I couldn't understand what she meant. After learning about the state of her married life, I found myself in tears in her hospital room. Ah, those jerks! How dare they treat my daughter this way? I will never forgive them. On this day, I swore revenge. Several days later, my son-in-law rang on my daughter's phone. Hello? Hawaii is amazing, Andrea. I don't want to come back. It's a shame you couldn't join. I got you a souvenir, so forgive me. He laughingly said on the other end of the line. Can you keep it down? I'm her mother. Must be nice, huh? To be on a vacation while she was suffering. Is this Andrea's mother? He sounded taken aback that I had answered my daughter's phone. I took a deep breath and said, She's passed away. We're in the middle of her funeral now. What? Upon hearing his seemingly pleased voice, I hung up the phone. The following day, my son-in-law, looking visibly uncomfortable, and his mother, Tracy, paid a visit to my home. I invited them in with a piercing glare. Photographs of my late husband and daughter adorned the altar. Stanley collapsed into tears at the sight of the picture. I'm sorry. I didn't think things would end up like this. She told me it was okay to go. I was furious at his blatant lie that he had gone to Hawaii because my daughter had told him to. In sync with him, Tracy said, Yes, why didn't you tell us such an important thing? I didn't get any contact either. To which I coldly retorted, But you went to Hawaii with them, didn't you? There's no point in reaching out to you. Are you stupid or something? Stanley, my daughter has shared everything with me. She must have felt so abandoned. Poor thing. After the hit and run, her so-called dependable husband went off on a ludicrous trip with his mother. Reacting to my words, he tutted and uttered something outrageous. I'm sorry about that. I'm swamped with work and can't really grieve for Andrea. Would you mind looking after her grave from now on?" His absurd demand caught me off guard. "I'd like to ask you the same. Wouldn't you feel better if you took care of her grave?" Tracy chimed in. As if to say that this was the end of our relationship, the two of them started to get ready to leave. So I said, "Oh, I see. So that's how it is, huh?" "Well, she left a lot for me. She was a bit naive and left me as the beneficiary of her life insurance." Upon hearing my words, their faces went pale. "What? Don't joke around. I'm her husband. The money should be mine," he yelled in a coarse, revolting tone. Tracy was also indignant. "That's rather presumptuous of you, isn't it? Andrea was part of our family. It's rather selfish for you to claim the money just because you're her mother." "Uh-huh, so that's your true colors. You were always scaring my daughter like that, weren't you?" "Poor girl." "Stanley, you were with her at the office, controlling her every move. She must have been petrified." I had heard everything from my daughter. "Everything was good after we got married. But as time passed, his controlling nature intensified. At home, he was always watching when I used my smartphone, and during work hours, he would take it away from me." She had told me that the messages I had sent were often deleted before she could read them. When I asked him what was written, he told me, "It says don't come home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. She pretty much hates you." Initially, she didn't believe it, but as I refrained from contacting her respecting her married life, she started thinking, maybe I regretted my actions deeply when I heard that. If I had known that, I would have visited her without hesitation. To add insult to injury, her mother-in-law Tracy, who lives nearby, would come to her house almost every day and complain about how poorly she did housework. She would say things like, "Your mother, she was a terrible woman who changed men like clothes when she was a student. Your father doesn't even know whose child you are. Tracy, you frequently reached out to me. Were all those communications nothing but lies? I've heard that you and Stanley physically abused my daughter. Is that true?" Stanley swore heavily, saying, Shut up already, you old hag. It's Andrea's fault for not listening to what my mom says. You're making it sound like I was violent towards her. All I did was make her listen, okay? Just hand over the money already. Your daughter was boring even after she got married. It was a mistake." As he laughed and admitted to his extreme control and violence, I stared at him and said, "I can't give you the money because, in fact, she's still alive. I've moved her to another hospital. I'm not going to tell you where, though. I wanted to see how you would react if I told you she was gone, but it was more disgusting than I thought." Furious at my words, Stanley said, "What the? Have you lost your mind? Poor girl, she has a mad woman for a mother." Next to him, Tracy was chuckling, but I didn't care. As they left the house laughing uproariously, I told them, "Your bad deeds will always come back to you. I'm curious about how your lives will turn out." As I chuckled, they gave me a strange look and said, "Creepy. Are you sure you're not crazy?" The door was shut with a bang, but I continued to watch their retreating figures, laughing. The next day, the two of them came to my house again, looking frantic. "Hey, lady, it was you, wasn't it? It's about time you stopped getting ahead of yourself, being a woman and all." "Huh? I'm not getting ahead of myself. I just talked to the company about taking some time off because my daughter had an accident and the doctor said she needed long-term hospitalization. I think that's the role of a spouse, but since the spouse was off to Hawaii with his mom, I had to do it. Irritated by my tone, Stanley grabbed my collar and raised his hand. Go ahead, hit me if you want to. I told you yesterday, didn't I? All your evil deeds will one day come back at you. My daughter isn't as naive as you think. It seems she noticed everything. She even knows who you really went to Hawaii with. At my words, Stanley's face went pale. Mom, Stanley has been having an affair with a younger coworker. The reason he wanted to go to Hawaii was probably for that junior. Despite her preference for nearby destinations, Stanley was insistent about Hawaii. This junior was equally eager to travel to Hawaii. My daughter, suspecting their relationship, decided to play along when Stanley planned to travel alone on the day of the accident, but she nearly burst into laughter at his desperate lie about traveling with his mother. The disgusting part was realizing that wasn't a lie and that there was an additional person joining them. I assumed they were going to Hawaii to ditch me and have their secret rendezvous. I had planned to take a lot of evidence photos, but then I had the accident. My daughter seemed to have thought things through. I headed straight to her company. Her boss was very surprised. The mother of his subordinate suddenly showed up, told him about the accident out of the blue, and then accused 2 employees of an inappropriate relationship. The photos my daughter shared included several of Stanley and his affair partner appearing rather intimate in the office. There were even photos of them clinging closely, which did not resemble a simple senior-junior relationship. He did that despite not knowing who was watching. He was such a fool. Isn't this woman on vacation at the moment? To which the boss replied, her father in the countryside suddenly passed away. However, the date coincided with Stanley's departure for Hawaii. The boss, initially in disbelief, said, "Let me just check something real quick," and came back after a while. When he contacted the female employee's family home, her father answered. He looked very angry. I understand that this is not something a mother should meddle in. However, my daughter is hospitalized for a long time and cannot move. I'm taking the liberty to request that you severely reprimand these 2. I pleaded, and the boss sided with me. I asked him to wait to reach out to them until their next shift, fearing they might run away. Stanley and his affair partner, blissfully ignorant, were looked at with contempt by their colleagues who knew everything as soon as they came to work, and they were told to stay home. The woman who tagged along on a trip with the mother was probably quite crazy as well. Of course, I wouldn't let it end there. This man, who disrespects women, needed to understand the inhumanity of his actions. It seems my daughter had gotten a medical certificate when she was subjected to violence. I wonder if I could file a complaint on her behalf. As I was thinking about this, a police officer came to visit my daughter's hospital room. I want to ask you in detail about the day of the accident. The truth of the accident was appalling. After some time, my daughter's divorce was finalized. Stanley and his affair partner were fired from the company. This was because it was found out that my daughter's accident was planned by Stanley and Tracy. When I was shown the footage from a security camera near the scene, it was so horrifying I almost covered my eyes, but I recognized the car involved in the hit and run. It belonged to Tracy's boyfriend, whom I had seen with her several times. When the police visited her boyfriend's house, he confessed easily. Well, Stanley said he found someone else he likes, right? I just wanted to support him as a mother. What's wrong with that? She responded to my disbelief. As for Stanley himself, he said, I thought a divorce would look bad, so I thought if I could cause her some harm, I could send her back to her mother. I thought I'd be lucky if she even died, because I get the money. He expressed absolutely no remorse, even making light of the situation. Apparently, they planned to get married on the day of the trip, and they had never intended to bring my daughter along. Those two deserve to go to hell. The affair partner was not involved in the accident and therefore was not held criminally accountable, but I made sure to demand damages. She was apparently a new graduate, and she told my lawyer, "I just graduated. I can't afford such an amount. Please tell Stanley to lower it." But being a new graduate has nothing to do with destroying someone else's family. In the end, she borrowed money from her parents, and she seems to be very uncomfortable because the rumor has spread in her hometown. Ha! Well deserved. Even if those two are released from prison, they will never be able to live a peaceful life. They should live in regret for the rest of their lives. It's a case of reaping what they sowed. As for us, my daughter Andrea has worked hard on her rehabilitation since then, and thankfully, her legs have recovered enough that she can walk normally again. She resigned from her previous company and started working at the same company as me due to my recommendation. I had told my coworkers about my daughter, and everyone welcomed her warmly. Several years later, a surprising person came to visit our home. "Long time no see, Sabrina. I'm not the person I used to be. I will make your daughter happy this time," said Stanley, the audacious ex-son-in-law, proposing to get back together with my daughter. "On what basis did you dare show up here? You love the police that much, huh?" As I pretended to take out my phone, a muscular man carrying a toddler, who calls me mother, emerged from the house, causing Stanley to widen his eyes in surprise. Andrea is happily married now, with a wonderful husband and a lovely child. There's no room for you in her life. She smiles happily every day since she left you. Have you ever seen her smile like that? Of course not. Now leave, I said, and her current husband, Keith, stepped forward. Stanley whimpered a little and hurried away. "Mom, you always help me out," my daughter says, but that's not true. If it weren't for my little girl who told me everything would be all right the day her father passed away, I wouldn't have been able to keep going. The one being helped, then and now, is me. I wonder if I've been able to be of any help to her. See my family smile happily, that's my greatest happiness.